If you want to understand why one country has managed to keep obesity rates below 5%, while much of the developed world has climbed past 30%, you need to stop looking at workouts, calorie counting, or willpower. Because the truth is, those aren't the factors separating them. The real answer is sitting on their breakfast table every single morning. And once you see it, it completely changes the way you think about fat loss. Here's what makes this so surprising. The Japanese are not starving themselves. They are not obsessively tracking calories. In fact, they eat more carbohydrates than most Western populations. Rice is a daily staple. Meals are frequent, balanced, and satisfying. And yet, rates of visceral fat, metabolic syndrome, and type 2 diabetes remain dramatically lower. Meanwhile, in countries like the United States, people are doing everything they've been told, eating less, exercising more, and still struggling with stubborn weight gain, low energy, and constant hunger. So what's really going on? Why does one system produce long-term health and stability, while the other leads to frustration and decline? The answer isn't about how much people eat. It's about how their bodies are being programmed by what they eat. Because deep inside your body, there are systems that determine whether calories are burned for energy or stored as fat. And most people, without realizing it, are sending signals every day that push their body in the wrong direction. What most people have been taught is a very simple equation: eat less, move more, and eventually the weight will come off. On the surface, that sounds logical. But when you look at what's actually happening in the real world, that equation starts to break down. People restrict calories, follow structured diets, push themselves through workouts, and for a short period of time, they may see results. But then something happens. Progress slows, hunger increases, energy drops, and eventually the weight comes back. Sometimes it comes back even faster than it was lost. And when that happens, most people assume the problem is their discipline. They think they didn't try hard enough or stay consistent long enough. But the issue is deeper than that. The issue is that this approach ignores how your body actually regulates fat storage and energy balance. Your metabolism is not a simple calculator. It is a responsive system that adapts to the signals you give it. When you consistently eat less, your body doesn't just burn fat. It also slows down energy expenditure, increases hunger hormones, and becomes more efficient at storing calories. It shifts into a protective mode, trying to conserve energy rather than spend it. This is why restriction alone rarely leads to long-term success. And this is where the contrast becomes clear. Because in places like Japan, people are not constantly fighting their own biology, they are working with it. Their daily food choices send signals that support a stable metabolism rather than triggering cycles of restriction and rebound. Once you understand that difference, you start to realize that fat loss is not just about effort. It is about whether your body is being guided toward burning or storing energy in the first place. After years of working in emergency medicine and seeing the long-term consequences of metabolic disease up close, I started noticing a pattern that didn't match what most diet advice was teaching. Patients would come in having tried multiple diets. They had followed the rules, they had reduced calories, increased activity, and for a period of time they saw results. But almost without exception, the same cycle repeated itself. The weight would return, energy would decline, blood markers would worsen again. And what stood out to me was not a lack of effort, but a system that wasn't being addressed. These individuals weren't failing. They were being guided by a model that didn't account for how the body actually adapts over time. That realization pushed me to look beyond the standard framework and into how different populations approach food and metabolism. When I began examining traditional dietary patterns, particularly those in Japan, I saw something completely different. People were not obsessing over restriction. They were not constantly switching diets. Instead, they were consistently eating foods that seemed to support stable energy, controlled appetite, and long-term metabolic balance. And the more I looked into the research behind these patterns, the clearer it became that this wasn't just cultural, it was biological. There were specific mechanisms being influenced by these foods that directly affected how the body handled fat, hunger, and energy. That shift in perspective changes everything because it moves the focus away from willpower and toward understanding the signals that are shaping your metabolism every day. To really understand what drives this difference, you have to look at a system that most diet advice completely ignores your gut microbiome. Inside your digestive system, you have trillions of bacteria that are constantly interacting with everything you eat. These bacteria are not passive. They actively influence how your body processes nutrients, how much energy you extract from food, and even how hungry or satisfied you feel after a meal. You can think of your gut as a complex factory where different groups of bacteria act like workers with specific roles. In a well-balanced system, these workers break down food efficiently, produce compounds that support metabolism, and send clear signals to your brain that help regulate appetite. But when that balance is disrupted, the entire system changes. Certain bacteria become dominant that are more efficient at extracting calories and storing them as fat. Others begin producing signals that increase hunger, making it harder to feel satisfied even after eating. This is why two people can eat similar meals and experience completely different outcomes. It's not just about the food itself, it's about how that food is being processed inside the body. And this is where the Japanese dietary pattern stands out. It consistently supports a microbiome that favors metabolic stability rather than fat storage. Once you understand that your gut is not just digesting food but actively shaping your metabolism, it becomes clear why changing what you eat can have such a profound impact on how your body stores or burns energy over time. The problem is that for most people, especially in Western environments, that internal system has been gradually disrupted over years without them even realizing it. Diets built around processed foods, refined sugars, and low fiber intake don't just affect weight on the surface, they reshape the entire microbial environment inside your gut. The balance shifts away from bacteria that support metabolic health and toward those that promote fat storage, inflammation, and increased appetite. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. The more that balance shifts, the harder it becomes to regulate hunger. Cravings increase, energy becomes unstable, and the body becomes more efficient at storing calories rather than burning them. This is where visceral fat begins to accumulate, not just under the skin, but around internal organs like the liver and pancreas. Unlike visible fat, this type of fat actively releases inflammatory signals that interfere with insulin sensitivity and metabolic function. What makes this especially concerning is that these changes happen gradually. You don't feel your microbiome shifting. You don't notice when inflammation begins to rise. But the effects show up in subtle ways: feeling hungry sooner after meals, struggling to lose weight despite effort, or gaining fat in areas that were never a problem before. This is not simply a matter of eating too much. It is a system that has been reprogrammed over time. And unless that system is addressed directly, the cycle tends to continue, regardless of how much effort is applied on the surface. This is where the Japanese dietary pattern begins to stand out in a very specific and powerful way. Because instead of disrupting that internal system, it consistently supports and restores it. Traditional Japanese meals are built around foods that actively feed beneficial gut bacteria rather than starving them. Fermented foods, fiber-rich vegetables, seaweed, and natural compounds found in tea and fish all work together to create an environment where the microbiome remains balanced and efficient. This is not accidental. It is the result of a dietary pattern that has evolved over generations to support long-term health rather than short-term results. One of the most important elements in this system is fermentation. Foods like natto and miso are not just sources of nutrients, they are living biological systems that introduce beneficial bacteria directly into your gut. These bacteria help shift the balance away from fat-promoting species and toward those associated with leanness and metabolic stability. At the same time, the high intake of dietary fiber from vegetables, seaweed, and grains provides the fuel these bacteria need to thrive. This combination is critical. Without the right bacteria, fiber has limited impact. Without fiber, those bacteria cannot survive. Together, they create a stable ecosystem that influences how your body processes food on a daily basis. And when that ecosystem is functioning properly, your metabolism becomes more predictable, your appetite becomes easier to regulate, and your body is less likely to store excess energy as fat. When you look deeper into how these foods actually influence your metabolism, the mechanisms become even more compelling. Take fermented soy, particularly natto, as an example. During the fermentation process, specific bacteria break down compounds in soybeans and transform them into highly bioavailable forms that your body can use more efficiently. This process not only increases nutrient absorption, but also introduces active bacterial strains into your gut that can shift the balance of your microbiome. Research has shown that regular consumption of natto can alter the ratio of key bacterial groups associated with fat storage and fat burning. When that balance shifts in the right direction, your body becomes less efficient at storing excess energy as fat and more capable of using it as fuel. Then there is green tea, specifically matcha, which is consumed differently in Japan compared to most Western habits. Instead of discarding the leaves after brewing, matcha involves consuming the entire leaf in powdered form, delivering a concentrated dose of compounds like EGCG. These compounds interact with your body's energy systems in a way that increases thermogenesis, the process by which your body generates heat by burning calories. More importantly, they activate brown adipose tissue, a type of fat that does the opposite of what most people think of as fat. It burns energy rather than storing it. When this system is activated, your body begins to use stored fat as a source of fuel more efficiently. Combined with the effects on your microbiome, this creates a powerful shift in how your body manages energy at a cellular level. Once you understand how these mechanisms work together, the next step is applying them in a way that fits into real life. And this is where the structure of the Japanese diet becomes especially valuable. It is not built around restriction or rigid rules, but around a consistent pattern that naturally supports these systems every day. A typical approach begins in the morning with foods that introduce beneficial bacteria and activate metabolic pathways early. A small serving of fermented food like natto provides both live cultures and compounds that influence how your body processes fat. Paired with a cup of properly prepared matcha, this combination delivers a concentrated dose of bioactive compounds that help stimulate energy expenditure and prime your system for the day ahead. As the day continues, meals are structured to maintain balance rather than overwhelm the system. Miso soup provides a steady source of probiotics and prebiotic compounds that support gut health, while vegetables and seaweed supply fiber that feeds beneficial bacteria and helps regulate appetite. Protein sources such as fish add essential fatty acids that reduce inflammation and support metabolic stability. What makes this approach effective is not any single food, but the consistency of the pattern. Each meal reinforces the same signals, creating an environment where your metabolism remains stable rather than fluctuating. Over time, this reduces cravings, improves energy levels, and allows your body to manage fat more efficiently without the constant need for restriction. Even with a system like this, there are a few common mistakes that can prevent people from seeing the full benefit, and most of them come from trying to shortcut the process. The first is inconsistency. These changes are driven by how your microbiome adapts over time, and that adaptation does not happen overnight. If you introduce these foods for a few days and then stop, the environment inside your gut simply shifts back to where it was before. The second mistake is focusing on isolated components instead of the full dietary pattern. Many people try to take a supplement or extract one compound, expecting the same effect as the whole food. But what makes this system work is the combination of bacteria, fiber, and bioactive compounds interacting together. When you remove that context, the results are often much weaker. Another issue is improper preparation. Heat, processing, and storage can significantly reduce the effectiveness of these foods. Fermented foods that are pasteurized no longer contain live bacteria, and certain compounds in tea can be degraded if prepared incorrectly. Finally, many people rely too heavily on short-term feedback. They expect rapid changes on the scale and overlook the deeper shifts that are happening in their metabolism. This approach works by gradually restoring balance, and that requires patience. When these mistakes are avoided and the system is followed consistently, the results tend to be more stable and sustainable over time. When you step back and look at everything we've covered, the pattern becomes clear. This isn't about willpower, calorie counting, or pushing your body harder. It's about understanding that your metabolism is not fixed. It is being shaped every single day by the signals you send through your food. Your gut microbiome, your fat-burning systems, your appetite regulation, all of these are responsive systems. And when they are supported correctly, your body naturally shifts toward balance. The reason populations like Japan maintain low obesity rates is not because they eat less or try harder. It's because their daily habits consistently support the biological systems that regulate fat storage, energy use, and hunger. When those systems are functioning properly, weight becomes easier to manage, energy becomes more stable, and health becomes more sustainable over time. Now think about your own routine. Not in theory, but in what you actually do each day. What are you eating consistently? What signals are you sending to your body every morning, every meal, every night? Because those small, repeated actions are what determine the direction your metabolism moves in. If this gave you a new way to understand how your body really works, save this video so you can come back to it and apply it step by step. And subscribe to the channel if you want clear science-based guidance that helps you take control of your health in a way that actually lasts. The truth is, your body is not working against you. It's responding to you. And once you start giving it the right signals consistently, the changes don't just happen, they build day by day into results that are stronger, more stable, and far more lasting than anything built on restriction alone.